Hello, my name is John Fechtel. I'm the Director of Technology at Generate, and I'm excited to present Mastermodel, a digital design delivery system pioneered by Generate Technologies. Our software is built to assist the architecture, engineering, and construction community, and that means involving all stakeholders, owners, architects, and contractors at the very earliest stages of the process, in a concurrent manner. You can think of this as our players. Each one has to work collaboratively on a single model, on a single mission, to achieve the best solution that meets all of the criteria brought by all of the users together. Our process is organized into workbenches. The first, which you can see here, is the site workbench, where basic parameters about the geometry and geography of the site are imported, analyzed, and acted upon. The next workbench, massing, is at the heart of our efforts. Built upon our unique semantic data model we call the building base, this spine-based structure allows us incredible flexibility and extensibility. We like to call this basic segment structure our driver sketch, a graph-based parametric input that carries with it building information stored in a way that it is both actually useful to the end user and also able to relate the parts of a building to the whole. So here, for example, we're going to demonstrate simple functionality that can be built on top of this spine, like, for example, adding floors to each bar of this building. Now we can add them individually, as we see here, sculpting the building in real time as we look around the site, as we look at how the site context influences the building's shape, understanding the placement of this building within the city, within the larger grid, and also trying to understand what the design outcomes would be from a kind of bird's eye view or a God's eye view here. But critically, we also want to be able to support the ability to test alternatives in a really quick and flexible way. So even while we have this sketch, we also want to be able to see what would this sketch look like if it was deployed in different ways on the site. What if its bones, its driver sketch was flexed and moved in a way that would change the design outcomes? We want to be able to test those things without incurring a penalty requiring rework. But at the same time, we also want to test exhaustive alternatives. So for example, what if the building looked like this, or looked like this, or looked like this? What we really want to know is what is the highest and best use of this land. And so we want to test all alternatives and allow the user to be able to test those freely and flexibly without having to redo the same work over and over and over again. But designers and owners also need to be able to quickly visualize the real-world impacts of their work in a real site context. Most designers actually spend far too much time in that God's eye view, and so building this first-person functionality is really critical to our project. So next, the building workbench is at the heart of what makes Generate and Mastermodel different. Everything in our model is built from this implicit subgrid, including our pre-vetted, pre-engineered building solutions. No one wants design solutions handed to them without input, so what we also do is we give users the flexibility to parametrically apply these building solutions. Structural design also requires this flexible and non-linear process, so we want users to be able to make significant changes, like, for example, to the height of a floor, without having to start from scratch. Generate's building solutions have been developed over the course of years, both at MIT and at Harvard, with the intent of being deployed onto multifamily residential and commercial buildings. These geometry kernels, as they were, these building bases, actually inform the tools as we build them, using real-world impacts, real-world outcomes from these projects to inform the further driving of these tools and the development of these structural solutions. This software could almost be thought of as a marketplace for end users, for owners, for architects, for contractors who want to try on different building structural solutions, who want to try on different ways of solving their design problems without having to incur the penalty and the cost of a really lengthy design exercise. We want to make that flexible and we want to make that fast. Critically also, that information is typically siloed, where the engineer would have the engineering information, the architect would have the design information, the owner might have some of the costs, the contractor might have some of the cost and constructability. We want to put that all in one place. We want to enable the users to look at the structure, to walk around it, to see it for all of its parameters, not only its cost, not only its structural capacity, but also its look and feel, also the way that it would be constructed on site, the sequencing and the logistics of delivery and organization. So we want to enable that kind of collaborative environment to happen here. So we're focusing on the multifamily residential design for our beachhead market. That is where Generate's primary experience comes from. Now, this is a really critically important typology, and it's a very tight margin business. Owners need to be able to simulate the business model of their building before it advances too far in design. When an owner puts an option on a piece of land, they're working on a clock. They need to either get the job to pencil up or they need to move on to the next job. So they need really, really quick feedback on what is actually possible to be built on a site. This requires a lot of coordination and a lot of effort. And what we want to do is we want to make that easier to accommodate. We want architects to be able to really flexibly respond to changing inputs from owners without having to do a lot of rework. We want owners to be able to have the flexibility and the freedom to test design alternatives without fear that testing those alternatives will burn out too much of their clock. So focusing on this multifamily residential design as a kind of start will help us to establish ourselves in this really critical market. But of course, we at Generate are designers by nature. We want to create these beautiful spaces above all, and to help users test these designs experientially and environmentally as they design. This is something that typically architects don't experience. We spend a lot of our times in two-dimensional environments and line drawings, and those are all important and all necessary for the documentation of a project. But we think that some of the most powerful documentation efforts can be done in this collaborative visualization sphere. We think that walking around a building before it is built, we think that walking through a building before it is built is a really powerful experience, and one that every designer, as they're designing these buildings, should be able to have. Not just designers though, also owners. We want contractors, and we want end users, the people who actually live in these buildings, to be able to experience this. Unreal Engine really is the perfect platform, this kind of design methodology of the future, one which is simple, powerful, beautiful, collaborative by nature, and above all, really fun to use.